administration. Many clients' interviews were waived or they were not required to appear in person for an interview if the officer could review the case on the papers and didn't need to see a client face to face to resolve any potential issues. Until recently, clients generally were only called in for specific types of cases, for marriage-based green cards, for naturalization interviews, or if they had been arrested or maybe had lied or failed to disclose a material fact on a prior application. Today, we're still not 100% clear on what triggers a case for interview scheduling because things are still developing, but it appears the trend is toward interviewing everyone or as many people as possible, whether there is a potential issue with the case or not. Yes. So as you well know, being scheduled for interview is particularly onerous for limited English proficient clients, in that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS for short, does not provide an interpreter, restricts who can serve as an interpreter, and has shown so far an unwillingness to be flexible in allowing for remote interpretation or other types of accommodations. Additionally, even clients who speak English, if they have a fair understanding and command of the English language, are taking a risk if they choose to appear without an interpreter, because even the smallest of inconsistencies, if it's just related to a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, can be counted against clients, and in extreme situations could result in denial. And denial, as you may know, could potentially result in the client being placed into removal or deportation proceedings. So in this client, it's more important than ever that clients have competent, trained interpreters, and that's where you come in. Next slide. You might, there we go. As I mentioned, USCIS does not provide interpreters, so it is the individual client's responsibility to obtain his or her own interpreter. This might seem like an easy task, because many clients have young children fluent in both languages who are used to interpreting for their parents, or maybe even family members who immigrated to the United States before they did. But putting aside the issue of allowing children or other family members to interpret and all the complexities and issues that come with those, USCIS will not permit family members, minors, or other interested parties to serve as an interpreter, even though they might be perfectly qualified to do so. All these restrictions limit a client's options, especially for immigrants from smaller communities, and that's why they and immigration attorneys such as myself rely on you. So how do you prepare yourself to interpret at a USCIS interview? You need to know when and where you are going and make sure you have your documents with you. Though Catholic Charities or another agency may have requested your services on behalf of the client, remember that you should double check the date, the time, and the address of the appointment and make arrangements to arrive early. Many clients arrive well ahead of their scheduled appointment time and then proceed to become nervous when they are there, but their legal representative or their interpreter hasn't arrived by the time they expect. You will also be required to present a real ID compliant government issued photo ID in order to enter the building. So please be sure that you have this with you on your person. USCIS officials likely won't accept a copy. So if all you have is a copy or a picture of it on your phone, you likely won't be able to pass through security and you'll be unable to interpret for the client. Additionally, if you are a permanent resident or a green card holder, it is advisable for you to carry your green card with you as well, since the law actually requires permanent residents to carry their green cards with them at all times. I have witnessed a USCIS officer ask an interpreter for the green card and then question the individual when they didn't have it with them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, next one. Thank you. Now that you know where you're going and what time you need to arrive, and you've double checked to make sure that you have your ID, what comes next? You'll need to get through security, meet and greet the client, and help the client check in. This probably goes without saying, but remember that you cannot bring a weapon of any sort into the building. And yes, pepper spray that you might carry on your keychain or a small pocket knife that you have to use as a tool are considered weapons. So be sure to leave those at home or in your car before entering the building. Um, and then the process of checking the client in consists of the client showing their interview appointment letter and their government issued photo ID. You'll go to the window with the client, sit down, have a short conversation, and the USCIS official there normally will take the client's photograph and then digitally scan both the left and right index fingers. And the purpose of that is identity confirmation. They want to make sure the person that they're interviewing is actually the person that filed the application. And then as the interpreter, you will be handed an interpreter form, and that's what's appearing on the screen now. If you all have interpreted before, you're probably very familiar with this, but for those of you who have not, they'll give you this form, ask you to take a seat with the client, and then work on this while you're waiting for the interviewing officer to come out and call the client back to begin the interview. The first part of this form is for the client, but you will need to interpret it for the client because, as you see, it's written in English. It states that the client authorizes you to interpret, has no relationship to you, fully understands you, and acknowledges that the personal or confidential information that might come up during the interview is okay with the client for you to hear. Next slide, please. And then the second part of the form is for you and states that you are fluent in both languages, that you agree to interpret accurately, literally, and fully, that you will remain impartial and unbiased. And if you notice that you cannot do that, that you will alert the officer immediately, and that you will maintain confidentiality. Once you've interpreted everything and you're satisfied that you and the client understand one another, you'll both sign the form and then wait to be called back in. So when the officer comes out, everyone will follow him or her back to the office, and the first order of business is to give the officer that interpreter form. Next slide, please. The officer then will collect everyone's IDs, so your ID, the client's ID, and if a legal representative is present, the representative ID. Those IDs will generally remain on the officer's desk until the conclusion of the interview and then be returned to you. As the interpreter, you will swear to interpret from English to the client's language all questions that the officer asks, and then from the client's language to English, all answers given by the client. Then the client will stand up, raise his or her right hand, and then swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then the interview begins. Next slide. The most common interview types for our clients here from Catholic Charities anyway are related to applications for permanent residence, or what's commonly referred to as a green card, or naturalization, what's commonly referred to as citizenship. And if you have little to no experience, you might find it highly beneficial to review the application forms. And Elisa, I'm not sure, but if we share these slides, these are actually links to the forms available on the USCIS website if you all wanted to go there and kind of familiarize yourself with the questions that will be asked and terms included on the application.
Yes, we can. I'll be happy to. I started to record this session so that it's available if anyone would like to review it later. And I'm also going to I can share this presentation with everyone who registered today.
Okay, thank you. I would recommend reviewing the forms because the officers generally just pull up the application form that the client submitted and go, from beginning to end through it. during the course of the interview. Not all officers will ask every question included on the form, but some of them do ask a fair number of questions. So it's a good idea to be prepared for what might come. Um, there are some words included on the application form that might not be part of your everyday vernacular. When I was, reviewing this to try to get prepared for today, things that stuck out to me that I don't use in English every day are bootlegging, espionage, hijacking, stowaway, polygamy. So if those are also no words that you use every day and might find yourself, reaching for the term in, Spanish or Kinyarwanda or whatever language you're interpreting, then those are normally asked by almost every officer. So it's a good idea to familiarize yourself. It's also worth noting that many clients don't understand the difference between being detained and being arrested. But in the United States, and especially in the immigration context, they are very different things. So if there are distinct words for this in the client's native language, or maybe even in the dialect, it's important to use the correct word. Um, you guys are the trained language experts, so I won't presume to advise you on how to fulfill your role. You know the protocols to follow, so we're just focusing today on things specific to USCIS interviews. I think we might be able to go to the next slide. If you need the officer to repeat a question or a part of the question, ask the officer to do so. Certainly, you want to make sure that you understand what's being asked so that you can interpret correctly. If you don't understand something or maybe a word that's being used, or if the officer has an accent, then it is completely fine to ask the officer to repeat him or herself or to rephrase the question. Also, if you think maybe the client didn't understand, for example, if the officer asks a question and you interpret the question and then the client answers, but it just doesn't make any sense to you, you should notify the officer. You can, as an aside, I think, and you probably all are more familiar with this than I am, but ask the officer for permission to clarify with the client just to make sure that there was actually an understanding between the two of them. Remember that you should use the first person. And remember what I've seen in many, many interviews is that clients either give very short answers or they want to give, an essay answer, it appears. They could talk for probably 10 minutes without taking a breath. But so that you can, confidently interpret what they've said, remember that you might need to remind them maybe even more than once during the interview to speak in short sentences. And remember that you cannot and should not engage in additional conversation with the client, because then the officer will become suspicious that you might be biased and or coaching the client on how to answer. USCIS definitely can be more formal than maybe others using interpreters. So just remember that you need to seek permission from the officer if you have to have additional conversation with the client. Okay, now tips to avoid. Sorry, Elisa, I think I was maybe a slide ahead of myself. How to avoid feeling intimidated. I know this is very personal and will be different for each of us, but some general tips are to remember that each person in the room has a specific role to play, and you know your role best. And although they hold a position of power over the client, USCIS officers are just people too. At the end of the day, their job is to adjudicate a benefit request, not to interrogate the client. And many interviews are completed without incident. Most officers are cordial, respectful, and reasonable, and will repeat, rephrase, or explain if you ask. You must feel empowered to communicate your needs, the client's needs, to the officer. It is okay to take a breath. If you need to take a breath, it is okay to use simpler terminology to communicate the meaning to the client. And there can be more than one way to interpret a phrase, and they are all correct. Okay.
Rebecca, I would like to jump in right here.
Sure.
Just go for a second. those of you who are familiar with doing your pre-session, this is a perfect time at the beginning of the interview to do that pre-session and remind all the participants of what your role is as the interpreter, and to take their time, so that you have the best opportunity to interpret for them as accurately as possible.
Yes, that's very important. Thank you for that. So while you're seated in the waiting room, have that conversation with them so that you can establish your rapport and become comfortable with one another. Remind them that if they don't understand during the interview, they should alert you, and then you can alert the officer. And then perhaps most importantly, maintain a calm, reassuring, and professional presence. For many clients, this really is one of the most important days of their lives. And even for clients who have the cleanest of cases, just the fact that you're there to accompany and support them is of the utmost importance to them. And they do rely on those of us who have a particular knowledge or skill set that they need to help them achieve their immigration goals and dreams. So that's why we're taking the time today to do what we can for you and make ourselves available to answer any questions that you might have, because, you know, as we have been stressing from the beginning, this is going to become more common, and I expect over the next, 3 years or so that it will continue. So many clients will be called in for interview, and they need your vital services. So I think that's all I have prepared. Elisa, I don't know if you have anything to add, but at this point, we can go ahead and go to questions.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Maurita. What is the form called that the interpreters fill out? What number?
Oh, I think it starts with the G, and I don't.
G1256 is what I noticed. G is in Germany, 1256.
Thank you.
Ah.
And that actually also, I believe, is available on the USCIS website. So if you wanted to review that ahead of time, you can just go there and download the form, pull it up on your screen, and
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question in the chat from an interpreter working here in the Louisville area. If I can find it now. I've worked with USCIS as an interpreter and a monitor for the last 20 years, but I have never served as an interpreter for an applicant. Should this be disclosed at the time of the interview?
Not to my knowledge. And, thank you for your service over these many years. I actually was not aware that USCIS would provide in-person interpreters. I know that monitors are used very frequently in the asylum application setting.
Mm-hmm.
But even, today, with regard to asylum applications, applicants are required to provide their own interpreter. So there's no need to disclose anything. If you've interpreted for the other side, if you will, in the past, because these are non-adversarial interviews and a setting. So unless you have some relationship to the client, or you feel for some reason that you cannot remain unbiased and impartial, there's no need to disclose any prior interpretation provided to the government.
But if I can add a comment, it is important that you are familiar with the terminology. So it is not only an appointment that you can sit and do the interpretation. You really have to review those forms before you go to interpret for this type of interpretation, because you have to have familiarity with what are they asking.
I think, Rebecca, if you can share, you mentioned some terms a little earlier that you had heard used in the USCIS interview with regard to things like polygamy, bootlegging, those sorts of words. Could you make a list for us that we can share as a follow-up to this training? And those of you who have heard terms similar in your areas, I know that we're talking about kind of the localized Louisville area, but if there's terminology that you've heard in your area that has kind of thrown you off or made you take a step back and decide how you're going to explain what that means, you're welcome to share that. And I'm happy to include that with the follow-up material that we share.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And like I said before, it's, terms that we don't talk about every day. Clients are asked about terrorist activity and genocide, whether they were involved with the Nazi government. So things that are not really applicable to most people, but still remain on the application. They'll have to talk about, commercialized vice, prostitution, things of those sorts. So I will definitely get that list together and hopefully we'll be able to share it next week.
We have another question from, I don't think this is from the Louisville area. Can you talk a little bit more about monitors? Now they are routinely present remotely. Larissa, that came from Larissa Dorfman. If I'm relaying that question correctly, I'm not sure if I am. So if there's any clarity you can provide on that question, that would be great.
Yeah, and Larissa, if it's okay, I believe I understand you, so I'll go ahead and provide an answer. And then, if I didn't answer the question, feel free to jump in and we'll go from there. But monitors, as I understand it, are specific to the asylum application process and are not provided in any other setting or for any other kind of immigration benefit. I don't have a lot of information about that because they are actually provided by USCIS. And monitors are trained language professionals whose duty is not to interpret for the client and not to interpret for the officer, but rather to monitor the interpretation to make sure that it is complete and correct, that the interpreter is not making any mistakes, so that USCIS can ensure that the interpretation that took place in the asylum interview setting was accurate. And yes, they are all remote. The officer, when he or she is ready to begin the asylum interview, will call the monitor, and the monitor will remain on the telephone for the duration of the interview. Oftentimes they will never speak. So if the interpretation is accurate, they won't say anything. Sometimes the officer will check from time to time to make sure that the monitor is still there. But I've attended several asylum interviews where the monitor does not speak and does not have to intervene.
Wow. I don't think I even knew that monitors were used. Big brother. Wow.
Well,
It's a protection also for the client. Yes.
They do tell you. And the last one I did, they said this is going to be video recorded and recorded, and there's going to be a monitor. Now, I often ask myself, should I ask the monitor, do you have any feedback for the interpreter? But I don't know if that should be seen as wise or not.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't know that they would be permitted to answer your question, but it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, asking for feedback, I think, is always permissible.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think this is Larissa. I'm actually I am in Boston. You're right. I'm not in Louisville. And I actually in Boston. They are calling in all the people who applied like 10 years ago.
Yes.
Right now, so I go every week, and I think like lately I haven't heard the monitor chime in, but occasionally you get someone who it feels like they have to justify their presence there, so they jump in with the silliest things. I think we're not allowed to actually ask for feedback, but I think the officer sometimes does. So yeah, it's not our job, I feel. But I was just kind of curious about your experience with the monitors. How often do they like jump in? Because as you mentioned so correctly, the problem is a lot of our clients, they don't even speak in full sentences, and we're supposed to interpret literally. So I think that's where the difficulty comes in, because I could make it much more understandable and, like word it better, but I'm not allowed to. So that's the question.
Right.
Sometimes the interpretation comes out as clumsy as the actual response.
Yeah, and that's just how it goes. If it doesn't make sense to you, you just have to relay what the client has said, and then the officer can ask follow-up questions for clarification.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't really include a lot of information today related to asylum interviews because they are happening here with a little more frequency. But here in Louisville, people who live actually in the state of Kentucky are under the jurisdiction of the Chicago Asylum Office. So most of our clients have to travel to Chicago for the interview, and then we contract with interpreters in Chicago to meet them there in person. Sometimes they do what's called a circuit ride, and they'll send an asylum officer here to Louisville for a week or two to interview some clients. But it's not as frequent. Larissa, as you mentioned, several interviews a week. That's not, as of yet, happening here in Louisville.
I understand. And I actually asked another question. So, like, since I'm speaking, maybe I can ask you directly. Are the questions, the standard questions that are asked, different for asylum or for green card or family reunification? And is there a way to get hold of those questions? Because they actually, I've been doing it for many years, and I noticed that they're kind of, they're longer now. They say terrorism is, they give like a long explanation, and then they say, have you been involved? Something like that. I always feel like it would be helpful for me to have it just translated for myself, and maybe even have like a cheat sheet so I can interpret it anyway, but it's not as doesn't sound as smooth usually if I do it on the spot than if I had it because they're standard, right? They're the same all the time.
Yeah. So they do ask different questions based on the type of interview. If it's a marriage-based or family type of case, then they'll ask questions about the relationship. For spouses, how and when did they meet each other? Who proposed marriage? What does the bedroom look like? Who pays the bills? Who drove to the interview that day? Whether they have a pet, what the home looks like, questions like that. But those questions are not really readily available or provided by USCIS.
I'm sorry. I think you misunderstood. What I meant is the questions that everybody gets asked, like have you harmed another person, or even if without against your will, have you provided material support, things like that. Those questions, they're so many of them now.
Yes, yeah. So on in the green card or citizenship application setting, those questions are all the same and they are provided on the application form, so you can review those. But unfortunately, in the asylum setting, you can take a look at the application form. It's called the I-589, but not all of the questions asked during an asylum interview are included on the form. So I did actually attend an asylum interview recently, and I am aware of what you're talking about, how the officer goes into great detail and length to explain, what particular terrorist activities might be, and then to question, whether the applicant or their parent or their spouse or child had any involvement with that or provided any kind of support. And then they go on to define what support looks like. But those questions are not available. So I don't know if that's something, if many of you frequently interpret for asylum interviews, it might be something that you could provide for one another. But aside from that, I will make a note and perhaps ask the local immigration bar whether they would be willing to help kind of compile just a general list of questions that they have seen frequently asked during the interview, and then we'll share that.
Thank you.
Supporting information we can come up with, I'm happy to share it. And I'll just say, I'm not an attorney. I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm supposed to share.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who regularly attend asylum interviews, and the practice of most immigration attorneys and legal representatives who attend interviews is to take notes so that we also have documentation, because Larissa, I know you go often. You see the asylum officer typing notes and recording every aspect of the interview, but the attorney will do that as well for the client. So I will check with my colleagues and we'll be sure to share what we can. It might not be an extensive or complete list, but hopefully it will be helpful.
Thank you. I just thought maybe there was like a forum where all those questions can be looked at in advance, but I don't know if there is. You said at 589 there are some of those questions included.
Some of them are on there. Yes.
Okay.
But
okay.
the vast majority are not.
Are not. Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not difficult. They're very standard, and basically they just require yes or no answers, but you still have to interpret them kind of fully, right?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And if I may add a comment also, you can take note. You know, you don't have to be worried about remembering everything, but you also have to turn in those notes to the interviewer before you leave. Sometimes they provide their own pad to take the notes, so you have to leave it in the office with them. And if you take your own, make sure that you turn those notes to the officer before you leave.
I could add to that comment. This is Maurita. I was there, last week, the week before, and I was taking the notes, and the clients were actually paying attention, and as though, where is that information going? So what I did is I made sure I crossed it out after I took the notes on the paper so that they could see I'm not. Hopefully they got the idea that I wasn't keeping it to use it elsewhere. And then I made sure that they saw me throw it away in the trash as we were leaving.
Yeah, that's a great best practice. I usually take like a marker with me, and when they ask them to confirm address, social security number, phone number, I mark it out. But then at the end of the interview, I usually don't put in the trash. I ask, do you have a confidential recycle or shredding, please? And I hand it to the officer. Because if you put something in the trash, that could be a risk of somebody else seeing that. So I would say, if we need to, turn that into the officer and say, here are my notes if you have a confidential recycle or shredding, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Great points. Thank you both.
Yes. And most of the recent interviews, they're likely more in person. I used to do in person, and then I did remote through COVID. And unfortunately, I only do it. I don't have many opportunities nowadays, you know, and I love to do those kind of interviews, but I think the percentage now remote.
We're back to in person. Exclusively, yes.
Yes, I'm very not happy because I moved to Florida. I used to be in Massachusetts.
And
after COVID, I moved and now I'm still working for Catholic Charities. I've been working for them for 20 years. But unfortunately, that part, I really enjoyed when I did it, but I'm not able to do it no longer, you know, and it's very limited, I think, by phone or video, right?
Right.
For those of you who don't maybe realize how you got the invitation for this meeting or how you got connected with the Louisville area, just so you know, Catholic Charities USA, as you know, is a large organization, and maybe the particular agency that you're working with is doing refugee resettlement, maybe a lot with immigrant programs, but within the Catholic Charities USA umbrella, there are several language service providers who are trying to work with clients and providing these services. And so Louisville, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Boston are four of the largest. Those locations, along with Washington or Alexandria, where our headquarters is located, I refer to us as the Five Families because that's a little bit of a mafia reference, I know, but it's meant to be a joke. But we are trying to take the lead in establishing this type of service, interpreter services for those who are our clients, are people who live, you know, among us and are trying to establish their lives here. So we work a lot with one another together. and share resources and opportunities. So if there's something that you need, something happening in one of the locations that I mentioned, and you're not there all the time, feel free to reach out to us for real, because we're happy to network. We're happy to work with as many organizations as possible toward this common goal.
Thank you.
I like the joke. It was funny.
I know not everybody was going to think it was funny, but it was meant in jest. So I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Also, just as a side note, interpreters who are working in the Louisville area, you all may or may not be aware, we've been working on trying to apply for different funding for different training that we're offering. In my opinion, this kind of falls in that category. And so when interpreters accept USCIS assignments with the Louisville office, you will be paid a premium for accepting these assignments. And that's kind of our way of illustrating how essential and important they are. I think just today we had actually a client who we were scrambling at the last minute to come up with an interpreter for this client because it has to be in person. And the client ended up being late, not the interpreter, but the client. And they agreed to see them. They agreed to, even though they had to delay the appointment a couple of hours, the interpreter has agreed to stay on site and be available to that person. And it's the most, it's the nicest thing, and I don't know if that interpreter is using the delay to attend this meeting today. If you are, don't worry, you're going to be taken care of. We'll make sure that all of your time is compensated and covered. And again, those in Louisville, you will receive, I'll provide more information about this in a direct email to those of you who are in the Louisville area, but we will be paying a premium for attending these assignments.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It is important because I know I stressed you all need to be on time, but definitely the client needs to be on time as well. And we have learned recently that there's an increase in the number of appointments scheduled daily, and the officers are only allotted 30 minutes per case that day. So we're really grateful that the officer agreed to make an accommodation and kind of put this client at the end of the day, and that the interpreter was able to stay. Does anyone have any other questions? Are we ready to be done early for the day, weekend?
Here's the last question. Go ahead, lady. I'll go after.
Okay, thank you. It's not related to the session, but will whoever attended the session today, will they get like any sort of I don't know, like a confirmation or something?
Yes.
Because I think this session was like required to take assignments.
It's not required for taking USCIS assignments. We thought that this would be helpful for interpreters who are interested in taking those assignments. We honestly, sometimes you just, from the administrative side of this business, we don't know why interpreters are not picking up these appointments. And sometimes we have to guess. Sometimes you have time to ask all those questions. Sometimes you don't. It just depends. So we were trying to go with our gut and say, look, maybe this is this is a little bit intimidating for the interpreter as well. So maybe we can provide as much information as we possibly can to put them at ease, so that they will be able to put our clients at ease. Does that make sense?
100%, yes.
And yes, everyone who attended today, I'll have a list of that, and I will be sending out a certificate of completion. In Louisville, you have a requirement for 4 hours of continuing education or professional development per year, and this count as one of those. So we'll make sure that we mark that for you and send out certificates for everyone who attended. Again, we're not, this is not accredited. This is not an official CEU. This is very informal. And this is really meant for you personally, to help you through these assignments. As a director, the way I view this type of training, if this is making you a better interpreter, if this is contributing to your skills as an interpreter, That's what I don't care about the accreditation. I'm going to give you credit for doing what you can to become a better interpreter for our clients. So that's why we're sending those certificates. I don't know how your agency will view them, but I will send them anyway. And believe me, I know all of the directors in the areas where you work. I hope I'm not bringing, any pressure on those folks, but I think that we're all kind of in agreement that we want you guys to participate in things that make you better at your job. That's really the bottom line.
All right. This is just a procedural question. I was at a Catholic Charities asylum appointment, and one of the first questions that the officer had was I the lawyer? I said, no, I'm the interpreter. And then she said, where's their lawyer? And I said, well, I asked them, where's the lawyer? We have no lawyer. You have the right to reschedule your appointment. She had to look shocked that they did not bring a lawyer to their asylum appointment. Is it common, or is it suggested or required for lawyers to be present there?
Well, definitely is not required. I would say, yes, it is suggested if the client did use the services of a lawyer or accredited representative to help them prepare the application. And I can't speak to all of the localities where you all are today, but Hank, I know you're here in Louisville. So the problem here in Louisville is that there are not enough immigration attorneys or legal services providers to provide asylum representation to everyone who is seeking those services. And sometimes the clients are not able to afford private representation, even if they could get a private immigration attorney to agree to take their case. So in some cases, clients will work with notarios. So I don't know if that's, broadly understood by everyone on this call, but basically in the Spanish-speaking community, it's viewed as something different in Spanish-speaking countries, and leads people here in the United States to think that notarios or notaries are licensed to practice law, and they are not. So they may work with a notario to prepare and submit the application for them, but then that notario is not able to represent them in the interview. And then sometimes people just complete applications by themselves or with the assistance of a friend or family member, and then that person is also not able to represent them at the interview. But most people who hire a private immigration attorney or, a nonprofit immigration attorney as myself, the clients will be represented at the interview.
Makes sense. No, they went ahead and said, okay, well, oops, I guess we'll reschedule, because he was like strongly hinting you should really have a lawyer here. And they took up on that.
Especially in the asylum setting. Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And I guess that goes to Rebecca's point. The folks with USCIS who are organizing these interviews, they're people too. And I guess that's an example, Hank, what you mentioned of somebody very subtly, as under the radar as possible, trying to let you know that an attorney would be best in this situation without actually saying it like that,
Yeah. Yeah. And I did mention that, these are non-adversarial interviews, but specific to asylum interviews, those officers have received specific training to be able to speak with the client and ask questions in a way to elicit the information that they need to make a decision on the application. And they understand as well, how high the stakes are with an asylum application. So they are a little bit more flexible or forgiving than perhaps an officer would be at someone's citizenship interview. So rescheduling is not always an option. But I think there's more of a chance that the officer would agree to reschedule in the asylum context.
As far as the monitors go, just to be clear, so if you're interpreting and the monitor feels that you interpreted something incorrectly, then the monitor would jump in and correct you, or is that what they do? Okay.
Yes, they would jump in and make a correction.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I would imagine they're also monitoring that you're not giving the client specific ways to answer, because I'm sure that would be terrible for everybody. Like, oh, you should really say this, or you should really say that. Yeah, I'm sure they're also doing part of that as well.
They are, and I have witnessed a monitor make corrections several times during the interview, but the interpreter is not disqualified. They're allowed to continue, and the monitor there is just, providing the assistance and making sure that everyone understands what's going on. But if there were misconduct like that, then the interpreter could be disqualified.
We have another question.
Yes, I think someone has their hand up. Lorena?
Oh, hi. Yes, this is me. Just I got in 5 minutes later, so I'm not sure I missed that question. But when the monitor is there watching us to certify that everyone understands what's going on, are we notified that they're there, or they normally just if they're there, they don't necessarily say that they're there?
Oh, you definitely will be notified. The asylum officer explains every step and every aspect of the asylum interview. So before calling in the monitor, they kind of just give a general overview of what to expect. But then they will alert everyone in the room that they are, calling the monitor. They will be on speaker, so everybody is aware of that. And then there will be introductions and, kind of some test interpretation to make sure that everyone understands and can hear each other. So yes, he will be aware. And I know you said you jumped in a little bit late. So monitors are not provided for all types of
Okay.
immigration interviews, just for asylum interviews.
Oh, got you. And did you just say that those interviews are only 30 minutes long? Is that for every state, do you know?
I don't know if that's every state. I know that that's here in the Louisville, Kentucky USCIS field office. I imagine it's similar for other field offices, but it can depend on the application type. So generally, they're limited to 30 minutes for green card applications and for citizenship applications. But for asylum interviews, that's a completely different story. The officers generally will reserve several hours for the interview, and I've seen asylum interviews completed in as little as 1 hour, but I've also had them take all day. So
Wow.
really hard to predict.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. This is
You're
wonderful
welcome.
that you guys are providing all this information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. I'll be here still.
Okay.
So again, I think sounds like we're at the end here, so we're probably going to go ahead and wrap. It is Friday for me too, so it will be early next week before you receive your certificates. But I wanted to let everything finalize here through the Zoom platform so that I have everyone's email address and name. And I'll get that out first thing next week. If there's anything else that you think of later on, you're welcome to, I think everyone has my email. That's where you got the invitation. So please, you're welcome to email me directly. And I'm happy to share all of that with Rebecca, as I receive your questions. So happy to help relay that information if necessary. Rebecca, I can't remember if we shared your direct email or not, but either way, you're welcome.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't think it's on there, but I am open to sharing that. So maybe when you send out materials, you can include that information in there as well.
I can do that. Well, thank you all again for attending. Have a great weekend, and like I said, watch your email early next week for your certificate of completion for this, as well as links for the recording and the follow-up documents that we were going to provide with regard to terminology.
Yeah. And thank you all so much. I really appreciate you being here and what you do. It's so important, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to work with you all whenever I can. I'm not able to do my job without interpreters for most of our clients because they don't speak English fluently. So we do rely on you as well, and I appreciate you.
Rebecca,
thank you so much.
I went ahead and put your email in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a quick question as well. So should we send the email to you personally, or how do you want our information shared?
I was offering to be the in between because I know how busy Rebecca gets, but that's up to Rebecca. I'll, if you want to, you may have to wait a couple days for a response because again, Rebecca is, you all can imagine, she's covered up. But
yeah, it's fine with me if you just want to email me directly for any questions that you might have. And if it's something that I can help with, definitely I will answer. And if it's more, in Elisa's wheelhouse, I'll forward it to her. But sometimes it does take me, I check my email all day long, but my inbox is usually very full. So it might take me a day or two to get back to you, but I will respond.
But will you be the one generating the certificate, or will it be Lisa?
Elisa will.
Oh, Lisa. So should I email Lisa my email address so that?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you registered in advance, I already have your email.
I did. Yes.
Okay, then no need to send that. I can pull that data from the Zoom meeting. That's not a problem.
Beautiful. Wonderful.
Yes,
Thank you so very much. I appreciate this. This was very useful. And I mean, as I go through a lot of these hearings, I'm finding that, a lot of the clients that I interpret for, they're really, really nervous. So this was very helpful to kind of go in with some good information. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
Bye.
All right. Have a good weekend, gang.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.